Welcome back from break, everyone. Just want to make sure that I'm hopeful that we are recording. Okay. We've now got our presentation by Robyn. So Robyn is going to provide a reflection upon what Shiv presented earlier today. And Robyn is really critical to the work of Shen because she really helps to relay the teachings and the knowledge in a way that many of us who are not experts can understand. And that's really important because if this is something that we're hoping policymakers take into account and sort of work towards simplifying the language and ensuring that a broader public can understand what is being proposed is important. And so with that, Robyn, over to you. We've got a little bit of a technology issue going on today, and so I will be managing the slides for Robyn, but Robyn will be doing the presentation.
Okay, well, welcome everybody, and you know, I am happy to see a lot more people today than last week. It's really wonderful to have you all involved. Your input and your thoughts and your creative juices, they're all really important to this work, so thank you for joining us. Okay, so why is teaching contemplative education so crucial? Well, Shiv talked a lot about these different issues, and we'll go through them one by one. Next. Next slide. Garima. Next slide, please, Garima.
I'm trying. It's just incredibly slow. It's not me. I know how to.
All right, well, I'll keep reading because the next.
Give me 1 second.
The next slide's a little bit wordy, so I'll start reading it.
Okay.
Okay, so why is typical education failing? The universe all matter in the world and all living things are part of an immense and undiscernible truth. We talked about this last week. But most people have never been taught about these concepts, about the transformation and the empowering ability you have with this type of transformative learning and learning about contemplation and learning about the unity of all life. And people don't even know about it. So, you know, they have no way of embracing it because they aren't aware of it. And many people that are aware of it don't really know how to grasp it and use it. And so the purpose of this proposal is to teach others the skills required to have a wholeness mindset that would unify the world. Next. Next.
It's going next to my slide.
Gariba, are we still?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, the next one after, yeah. Okay, the one that has the pictures of the horse and the wagon should be up on the screen.
Yep, that's what I'm seeing.
There we go. Okay, the science.
A little delayed.
Okay, science behind unconscious living. I see. Maybe that's the problem. Okay. As Shiv described, you know, people live in this automatic remote control thing. You get up, you eat your breakfast, you brush your teeth, you go to work, you know, you wash dishes without thinking about it. And then something happens where your ego or your personal emotions take over and cause a reaction that's out of your automated responses. And the wagon analogy that he talked about was absolutely perfect. The wagon is your life as a whole. The driver would be your mind. And whether you're conscious of what your mind is doing or not, the driver is your mind. And the horses are the instincts and the emotions and the ego. So if your mind lets your instincts and your ego take over your life, you know, as you can see by the slide, the wagon is not doing really well with the horses totally in control without any driver. And so it's important to have your mind be in a state of conscious awareness so that you can actually control your behavior and control your reactions and be aware of everything around you. Next. So contemplating learning is life-changing. Our natural instincts were given to the first humans to help us survive before we had any knowledge or experience. I mean, we actually needed those instincts. But now we don't need those survival instincts that take over without thinking. Today, there's no official teaching about how to grow from that caveman automated instinctual life behavior. We need to experience life through full awareness, and it's more crucial to wholeness than just basic knowledge or facts. But the desire and the purpose for wholeness must be as compelling as basic instinct is for a person, for them to be willing to make the effort and make the changes and learn the skills. So, but the problem today is that people are not taught about wholeness. They aren't aware that there's a whole different way of living. And so they don't have a desire. They don't have the natural desire to take up yoga because they don't know why it's important. So this is where traditional education must be changed. Next. So again, last week we talked about, some of the failings in traditional education. In traditional education, they talk about bullying, but they don't talk about love and compassion and understanding. They teach kids about prejudice, but they have never taught about the scientific fact of unity of all mankind and every living thing. And they discuss the environment on a regular basis, and everything's terrible and we have to make these changes, but they don't ever touch on the fact that all life is connected, and it's been scientifically proven now. They don't teach these things. So the students are given the rationale, and they're given the problems, they're given the facts, but they're never given a deep understanding of how it can be changed. Contemplation and being fully aware of life is the way to fill those gaps. So the question is, how do we teach this to someone who has no knowledge of its existence? Well, you first teach about social ethics and morality and just basic courtesy and things that are not typically taught in schools. We should teach focusing techniques. Just teaching somebody how to focus on one item, one visual thing, one thought will help them when it comes to their contemplative skills. Share ways to find peace through connection with nature and with animals. Maybe adding games like chess or checker to enhance skills of focusing and deep thought. And the kids would probably like that, and not realizing they're learning skills of how to focus. Teaching deep breathing exercises, again, just how to breathe in a calm, controlled fashion. And when these skills are starting to develop, then you go into the yogic contemplation techniques that Shiv went through, and those will be life-changing. Next. Social ethics is more needed than ever now. I mean, with the world the way it is, we really need to start teaching these things again. Social justice and equality are discussed all the time, but individual morality, ethics, and honor are not discussed. If individuals were moral and ethical and honorable, a lot of these social justice and equality issues would take care of themselves. So education discusses what the problem is, but they never discuss ways to solve it. Even back in 551 BC, Confucius believed that social ethics was the key to peace, and his contributions and philosophy has changed the world in many ways. He wanted to bring back the most successful and longest peaceful dynasty in China. It lasted 1,200 years by bringing back the virtuous life. I guess we could call it the good old days. One of his quotes, "He who is in this world can practice 5 things may indeed be considered man at his best: humility, a magnanimous action, sincerity, diligence, and graciousness." I mean, a sincere man in Confucius's eyes was a man who would always conduct everything on the basis of what's virtuous, what's honorable. And when you live in that way, you reach to to lead a virtuous life, then your character and everything will affect everyone and everything around you. If everybody lived that way, the world would be a different place. Next. So we've got some case studies of holistic type education. We did touch on these last week. The Bildung version, which is German for education, refers to the German tradition of self-cultivation. You know, it's more than just the books and the numbers. Developing personal skills, developing spiritual and cultural sensibilities. And it's a way to become more free due to a higher self-reflection. In fact, von Humboldt wrote, education, truth, and virtue must be disseminated to such an extent that the concept of mankind takes on a great and dignified form in each, who must absorb the great mass of material offered to him by the world around him and his inner existence, using all the possibilities of his receptiveness. In other words, not just your eyes and your ears. You have to really think about it and get engrossed in it and contemplate it and make it part of your being. These concepts were very, very influential at the time, and there was actually a resurgence of those concepts in the 1960s. So it's definitely worth considering bringing that type of education back into our holistic education practice. Next. So in 2016, Harvard did a case study called Ethics in the Classroom, and it was really interesting. It was based on creating fake problems. You know, they would create a student and create issues about that student, whether it was a bad home life, whether it was a drug addicted parent, whether it was about, total bad behavior. Anyway, they created these case studies, and then they talked with each other and they thought about, how can we help this student? What should we do with this student? They actually address the problems. And I find it very fascinating that, a place like Harvard understands that contemplation is crucial to solving problems, and yet it's not taught in our schools. And so this is a perfect example of the fact that educators somehow know things need to be contemplated, but we're not sharing it with our young people. Next. The art of yogic contemplation is, basically the crux of it all. After students learn the basic skills and concentration games, then they can be taught to go to the next stage. True contemplation is the idea of intense focus on one topic, one thing, one issue, one question, without allowing other thoughts to sneak in. And it takes practice. And it takes a desire, and that desire has to be created by us in the curriculum and the explanation about why this is so important to this holistic education. And it can reduce your life distractions. You can deal with issues better. It's proven scientifically to lower your heart rate, your blood pressure. You're less anxious. You have an increased sense of peace. Allowing our spiritual knowing to come into our thoughts is really very important. When you cut off all the distractions and all the sort of weird background noises in your life, you actually can hear and create thoughts and images of things that you didn't know before. And that is part of the spiritual knowing that we've lost sight of, when many, original Aborigine type civilizations have known this for centuries. It also allows you to a complete experience of now. And what does that mean? I don't know if any of you have heard or read Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now, but it's really quite amazing. It's teaching yourself to focus on every moment and experience every possible thing in that moment. And the example he gives is washing dishes. You wash dishes, okay? You rinse the dishes, you stick them in the dishwasher, you wash them, you put them in the dryer, whatever. You don't think about it while you're doing it. But let's say you are experiencing washing dishes. You feel the warm water on your hands. You listen to the sound of the water as it's coming out of the faucet and how that sound changes when you put the dish under the water or when you put your hands under the water. You sense the smell of the soap and, you know, is it lemon? Is it flowers? Is it mint? I mean, you're actually experiencing washing dishes by tuning into all your senses, and those things can be taught, and it increases your sensibility to everything, to other people's feelings as well. Next. So there's been lots of mindfulness studies that prove this is actually working. Thanks to Emmy Miller, she sent us several links, and I went in and read some of them, and it's amazing how much actual proof there is now that some small school districts are trying things, and it has been proven that it creates better concentration in school. It makes the children have improved attention, their behavior problems are reduced, anxiety in kids you know, is reduced. It has proven to work on ADHD children with a significant reduced hyperactivity behaviors. So it's actually out there. It's being used, and it's been proven more with adults. So we definitely need to work more with the young people, but there's good evidence from neuroscience and brain imaging even that mindfulness meditation reliably and profoundly alters the structure and function of the brain. So these things are so important for children to be taught, not only to be having a wholeness and a worldview, it helps them to be more aware of everything around them and how their behavior and their thoughts and their actions can affect the universe. So that's it. Thank you for listening. Again, as always, we want your input on everything because we have you here in a working conference so that we can get your opinion. So thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Robyn. That was really helpful. Just trying to see the chat. Susan had to leave, unfortunately, in the middle of your presentation, Robyn, but I'm sure that we'll catch up with her afterwards. So now we are at the discussion part of today's meeting. And so based off of the presentation that Shiv presented earlier today, or if you've got reflections on the experiential part or on what Robyn had just presented and some of the case studies that have been provided on where this is, where some of this has been implemented and is shown to work and hold some promise, I wanted to pass it over to the participants now to hear their thoughts and really in a conversation of how I'd ask people to think about the moment that we're in the world. It seems like that there's a lot going on. There is a lot going on. And so how do we, in this world where there is a dizzying amount of information swirling, asking people to slow down and to contemplate so that we can think through these really, really complex issues together, I think is ever more important, but also becomes even more difficult. And so that's just a kicking off discussion question, but we don't have to talk about that. We're open to hear your thoughts about anything that you might have to say.
Okay, well, maybe you can request people to unmute themselves and be visible.
Yes, that would be great. If you can unmute yourself and put on your camera so that we can see you, that would be helpful. Thanks. Any thoughts? No thoughts.
Right?
Okay.
Oh,
Can I?
yeah.
I'm not gonna, well, not about what we just did today, but one of the thoughts that I had was, I thought we were kind of looking at the proposal that's been written and wanting feedback on that. I was just gonna say, between what Dad talked about, and that's what I see a lot in the proposal and the way Robyn just put it, I think the two need to be melded.
Okay, and can I just probe that a little bit? What about that needs to be melded? Is it language? Is it about what's presented? Is it about
I
how
think it's a little bit of both. It's a little bit of language and it's a little bit about what's presented, because I think some of the way some of Robyn's slides need to go into that proposal.
Okay.
It's just a overview kind of thing, but that's what I was thinking, that when I read the proposal, I'm hearing dad. And when I listened to Robyn and saw hers, there's points in there that I didn't quite see come out in the proposal.
Okay, that's a
Just
really helpful.
my 2 cents.
That's really helpful. That is really helpful. At our last session, we went through the proposal with a little bit of depth, and I think the feedback that you're providing right now is similar to what we heard last week from folks as well. And that I think when we think of people who are in a position to sort of implement policy or develop policy and programs, the simpler the language, the better. And so there's always this tension in fields that do have significant traditions behind them and centuries of thinking behind them, right? How do you reflect that in a language that is
Distill it down, yeah.
right? And that is a challenge. And so I think definitely we will work towards doing that. Milt, I think I saw your hand go up, but perhaps I was mistaken.
No, I was just looking for something. I mean, I do have some comments about this, and maybe Robyn can answer them better. First of all, I thought that as we were doing this work, one of the things that was really important was for young people, particularly, to understand comparative religions. And so I think I haven't heard anything about that, and I think that belongs in our presentation. And I think, you know, in the work that I do, it really appears as if the problems that we're dealing with today started several thousand years ago when we separated from the earth. And we separated from the notion of deep, deep appreciation for all life. So I hear too much of the presentation is sort of very anthropocentric, that this is about how people are sort of above other life forms in all these ways, and looking at consciousness that way. And I just think that the consciousness of mankind has been so incredible for so long that people can survive in these terrible places, and they know things that we try to pass on through kind of book learning, but they learn them experientially. So what I guess what I'm basically thinking is that in the religious teaching that we do, I think the most important thing is for young people to learn to think for themselves. And I think they have the consciousness to do that. I work with all kinds of people who are recognizing that young people go through a maturation sequence and they have a consciousness development at each of those stages. And I think that's like really important for us to recognize that and honor it and have them grow through those maturation processes with an understanding of what's important to them at these various ages. So I didn't hear that. The other thing I was kind of, I think it's there, but I'm not really hearing, it's just how do we play the game of life? You know, it's about organizing our lives around particular guiding principles. And we talk a lot about the earth being ravaged and so forth. And I think that sort of thing happened with empire, and that was several thousand years ago. And we've just gotten progressively off course. So I think we need kind of a historical understanding of what is an appropriate consciousness for us? And I think it revolves around guiding principles of ecological integrity and communal harmony. And we have to honor those all the time. And I work with people all the time who are saying things like, that we understand the virtues that we cherish about life, and we know that we must live them every day, every moment, every decision. So if we look at our culture right now, and we look at guiding principles of ecological integrity and communal harmony, we are compromising those principles in every moment. And I think it's very important to understand that. And the way we're breaking them in every moment is with our economic system. We make economic decisions that we compromise things that are very important. So I think in contemplate, I actually don't know, as I'm listening to you, we're using the words contemplative education. And there is an emphasis, a high emphasis on contemplation, but there's an emphasis on a lot more. And I think it's the lot more emphasis that really needs to be brought into this. And then I agree, and I work with people who want to teach from the heart. That's basically the way they talk. I want to teach from the heart. I want to teach and the heart for them is their truth. I want to teach from what's true for me. So I think we're capturing some of that, but there's an earth-based spirituality. There's an appreciation for all the life support systems that exist. There are many spiritual people have a covenant with the life systems, and they think in terms of when we do this, we ravage the earth this way, we put out pollution, whatever, how it destroys the life systems that are our support systems. And we're essentially living downstream from our own actions and everybody else's actions. And so, anyway, there's just a lot, I think, that we can put into an interfaith education, and we either should do it here or recognize that this is a subset of a larger interfaith education approach that we'd like to take. Thank you.
Thanks, Milt. There's a lot to unpack there, and I've got some questions for you. But I see Joyce, Nate, or hand up. I think nobody else right now. So, and then we can go to Raj Uncle. So let's go to, yeah.
So I just wanted to. So I must admit I've not really been involved with Shen for the past couple of years. So please don't mind my comments. So two things come to my mind. The first one is that I think the focus is too much only on school education. I think we need to provide, or at least think about, how it connects all the way through. So for example, all of us here are in some sense the converted. We all understand these things. We appreciate contemplation and so on and so forth. But I would suggest that we need to think about how to educate young children, middle-aged children, going to university, going beyond that as well. At least think about how these things are connected with each other and not just focus on one area, which is the school children. So that's my first comment. The other comment I'd like to make is that we need to provide appropriate examples for each age group. Now, if you talk to a child about breathing exercises, I'm going off on a limb here, I may be incorrect, but I suspect they're going to be bored out of their minds. So you need to sort of have an appropriate level of an example. And yes, these examples get more detailed and more introspective as you go up in your levels, but we need to provide appropriate examples for each age group. So those are the two comments that I'd like to make. Thank you.
So much, Raj Uncle.
Yeah, it's nice to hear all those comments, and I think what Ajay Opal said is also valid. But before that, I have to get back to the model we are trying to develop here, a model of education. And in that model, things that have to be taken into account, how did we learn ourselves? What was the model we used? And what is the model being used now? And for this, I'm glad today the reference was made to Indian scriptures, which was completely missing in the past. First of all of you present here, think of yourself. Do you exist? Just think of it. And are you listening to me? Are you conscious of what I'm saying? If these two are facts, if you don't believe that you exist, if you don't believe you are conscious of what I'm saying, then it's fine. You are not in the loop. But if you do believe you exist and you believe you are conscious of what I'm saying, then that part is ultimately true. My existence, and I cannot deny anyone else in that case, their existence. My consciousness, and I cannot deny that other might be conscious too. So that consciousness and existence is ultimately what we are trying to fathom. This is what we want to teach. Now, life and object, subject and object, that is what creates the distinction. And why does that happen? Now, again, going back to the Indian scripture, there's a very nice word called Jagat. Jagat means basically manifestation or appearance. It does not mean birth. It can be interpreted as birth. Just manifestation and appearance. And consciousness means that we are aware of that existence, whatever that existence is, whether it's a tree or a worm or a building. Okay, that's consciousness. And that consciousness and existence both are universal in nature. And that is what we call spirituality, being aware of existence, all the existence, and consciousness. Now, this is going on in the world. Things come in the world, appear, disappear, sun rises, appears, sets, disappears. This is happening all the time in the world. And that movement of objects in the world comprises Jagat. That's the name given to objects in the world, Jagat. But we make a model of it. And the model we make, Christian model is one, Islamic model is another one. The model we make of what is happening in the world, ourselves, that is known as samsara. And we are caught in samsara. We all have different samsara. Jagat is same. But we have all created our own samsara because of the education we had. And how did we come to that education? This part has to be learned. And I'm glad that now concentration has been brought in the picture of education. Contemplation has been brought in the picture of education. And the learning is very simple. First of all, now today a statement was made about living in the present. What does it mean to me personally? If I focus on one thing, everything is kept out. And once things are kept out, that is what is present for me. And I'm living in that object, observation of that object. I'm living in the present. And the word had been blown out. How many pages are there at the trolley's work? Few hundred pages. We are lost in the words. But basic focus, I'm focusing on what I'm doing now. Okay. Now, that is called concentration. That is called dharana. And that's part of Indian traditional education. First, we accept, focus on it. What is it in the focus? Doesn't matter. Just you focus on it. And then once you focus on that, that becomes the object, and one who focuses becomes the subject. And that is where the subject-object dichotomy comes in. And every subject has their own sansar. And based on their sansar, Christian world will decide on the basis of Christianity. Islamic world, Islamic sansar, would decide on the basis of Quran. And this is common. And that is where the difference comes in. So bringing in faith in education is the first mistake one can make. Faith is an object now for observation. Okay. So first we learn how we object. We focus, children focus on toys. Give them a toy, tell them a story. They will automatically be focused. Then from there we go to what it means to me. Now we have read it, If you go for what we have read it, we have made our mind artificially intelligent, basis of the information supplied by different religion, different faith, different ideas, different conception, different theories. We have simply given up our freedom of thinking, and we go by that model. So that is part of our samsara. We take a model, we stick to it. So if we can set aside, we think what is good for us. Now we'll put ourselves in others' position. What is good for us? Now we are getting into contemplation. Whether life is good, life is not good. Whether this kind of life is good, where eating meat is good, eating meat is not good. This is what is consisting of my samsara. Maybe I should give time to some other people, and if you have more for me to clarify, I'll come back to it.
Thank you. I think that there's a lot to unpack there. And I certainly want to unpack both what Milt had to say and what Raj Uncle had to say. But before I take up some space, Robyn, let's go over to you. And then Fred, I think I might have seen your hand up, but I might be wrong. So let's go to Robyn, then Fred, and then Anne. Let's keep that as the speakers list for now. All right, Robyn, over to you.
Okay, I wanted to address Milt's questions about the religion and faith, and also the nature-based practices. I don't know how many of you had a chance to go through the sample teaching materials, but basically they're a series of lessons, and they touch on these things, but not in an immense way, which allows the teacher to, you know, I mean, there are some discussions about what different religions believe about the spirit on one of the slides. There's many slides about the fact that we've proven now that plants have life energy and that they share their energy with each other. We've talked about the transfer of energy between humans and animals and humans and plants. So those are basic scientific facts, but they're also the basis of the way the indigenous people sort of automatically knew, even before science knew it. So the hope is that the teacher would take these slides and spread out the curriculum with that as a basis. We talk about sacred sites in different places, which is obviously connected to faith practices and cultures. Again, the teacher would take that discussion about the sacred sites and spread it into maybe a whole week of different studies, you know? So I think the possibility of addressing all those things, Milt, that you wanted to talk about is there. The curriculum we've created is just kind of a beginning for the teacher to use as an outline, and then to spread out in the different areas that we all think are important. And obviously, if a class is in Islam, you know, they're going to discuss the spiritual practice of their faith versus another country that's teaching this that believes more in Christianity or Hinduism or Buddhism. They will bring their own faith twist in as well, which is, you know, probably normal for that area. But we are trying to bring the religion and the faith practices in, and the indigenous practices in such a way that the teacher can grow on those in the way that feels comfortable to them and their classroom, based on age, intelligence level, country, culture, so forth. So what we would provide is just the basis, and then they grow the lessons from there. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks so much, Robyn. That was very clarifying. Fred, over to you.
Fred? Hello, Fred.
Yeah, I think he's just trying to.
Oh, there you are. Shiv, go ahead. You had your hand up before me.
Well, I just wanted to respond to Professor Opal's point that what we're talking about here is not necessarily geared only to primary schools or high schools, across the board education. If we want to bring something up on a system level, it has to be the whole system. Where are the teachers going to come from? Let us say we focus only on primary schools. Where are the teachers going to come from? So there has to be, we have to consider the question of training of the teachers. Otherwise, everything is going to fail. Whatever you want, whichever model you want to bring in, if teachers are not taught in that model, then they've got to at least have some training in that model. So that training and research, how to communicate the model, has to be done at the university level. There is no other place. And yoga, what we're talking about, contemplation, Einstein was not working at the primary level. If you look at Einstein's theory of relativity and his energy mass equivalence, people with PhDs in mathematics will not be able to follow. But he did that all with contemplation. Look at Ramanujan's mathematics. Professor Hardy of Cambridge, he threw his Ramanujan's two pages that he sent to him from Madras on his work. He threw it in the waste paper basket because he could not understand it. While going home, he realized that there must be something in those two papers. He went to his waste paper baskets and fished out for those two papers. And then he looked at it himself. He saw that there is something more than what meets the eye. Then he got his other mathematician colleague from home, and both of them spent all night looking at those two pages and discussing them. And the next morning, they decided to get Ramanujan from Madras to Cambridge. And hundreds of PhDs on his work. This is what we are talking about. Imagine if there's one Ramanujan at any university, what will happen to that university? And we are talking research here. We are talking exploratory research and authentication of knowledge. That is what your mind is able to do. So Professor Opal was right that this what we are talking about has to be across the board. Otherwise, it'll start with a failure because there's nobody to teach it at the school level. So think about where the teacher is going to come from. And if the universities are talking rational education and the primary schools are talking contemplative education, it's not going to work.
Thanks, Sayaji. Fred, over to you.
Shiv, you just took the words out of my mouth. I was listening to Professor Opal and I said, we have to, not we, the way to do education is across the board. But it's a different presentation for each. First of all, there's certainly, you have to put it in a way that the kindergarten kids can understand it, and that's a curriculum detail. But you can also basically put it on a corporate level, because you start and think about, at the end of the day, the people around this conference were outliers, outside the empire, if you like. And Milt, you mentioned the empire. If you look at any change specifically of any of the sages or whatever, all of that was they were outside, they were known as radical, and radical means truth. We don't want to be radical, but we certainly want to basically at each level that we're looking at is we have to address it to the needs as opposed to saying this is what you should have. So for example, and this is a very brief example, if you had a corporate mandate, etc., and everybody's now into mindfulness, right? Oh, that was the last one. But we're talking mindfulness, are we not? In a different methodology, but fit it into basically the people that we are trying to address. That said and done, not an easy task, and certainly don't bite off more than we can chew. Beta test, beta test, beta test, everything, so that in actual fact you've got some kind of solid evidence that you can basically put forward, even if it is subjective. And to what you brought forward, Shiv, was excellent, by the way. First of all, you're getting sharper and sharper on these presentations. But what you brought forward is exactly where we should be going. Now, how do we get there is the question. And that's, I think that that's certainly an opening for next week. And I know, Garmin, you're going to talk about policy, etc. But who is it? What is it? And specifically across all levels. That in actual fact, that should be our goal. And by the way, I apologize, I didn't have my hand up, Garmin, but you know you don't give me a mic. But the second, I was waving my hands because I got my neighbor here, and of course the dog wanted a treat. So, you know, so it looked like probably I was waving my hands, but thank you so much. Thank you.
No, thanks, Fred. Always a pleasure to hear from you. And let's go over to you, and then we'll take it from there.
And you are muted.
First of all, I'd like to say, Robyn, congratulations. I think that is a wonderful, wonderful way to start. And I think we realize that nothing is perfect, but we have to start somewhere. I have a couple of comments, and one that is immediate is that Shiv mentioned the fact that we have to have teachers to teach this. So we have to somehow get this into general education. And that was one point that I had written down. The other thing that comes to mind is the word samsara. And we all know that suffering is something that makes us all stop in our tracks and really think. And it certainly made the Buddha. It changed his life and changed many of our lives because of his wonderful teachings and his discovery because of that. And we're in a world of great suffering right now. Not that the world isn't always a place of samsara, but we're in the midst of COVID. We have, and again, when Shiv talked about the horse-drawn carriage with the wagoneer, the wagon, and then the horses, I feel that there's a tremendous amount of suffering going on. We're bombarded by the media. There's fear-mongering. There's a lot of anger. There's a lot of superficial stuff that is driving people. And this is exactly a place where we want to deal with something and get them to understand and become in control of things. And so I think we have a teaching moment here. And Shiv, you mentioned that we've got to use all levels to teach people. And I think we have a teaching moment here with people in the midst of COVID and all that is happening to them, because there is nothing that will make people think than suffering and being unpleasant and feeling uncomfortable with what's happening to them. So how can we reach these people by teaching them some of these basic skills that will help them to come in touch with something a little more in touch with what we're talking about, and that is that unity that we all have, and that is basically what we're all sitting here talking about, this unity and diversity, and help them to become a little bit more conscious of who they are as people, instead of just living by the seat of their pants and going with what the media is saying and getting into all of this business. We have the whole business of Black Lives Matter. And I believe that, Robyn, you touched on a very important point, and that is that they teach about bullying in schools, but really we need to teach about compassion and what it is to be part of a larger family. And so I think that, again, going back to Shiv's point, that we have to teach at all levels. So the families have to become more aware of how to teach their children about compassion, about how to treat one another within the home, and then that is modeled outside in society. So I think that there are a lot of levels, and we have to sometimes seize the moment too in education, and maybe we have to look at what is happening today. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne. I'm just going to interject here with just a couple of my own thoughts, and then Raj Uncle, I see your hand for a hot pursuit, but if there's somebody else that also wants to put up their hand, let us know. I think that just to be a bit provocative, perhaps not provocative, but real, as again, as the resident younger person on the call, that many issues that are afflicting people of my generation are really about a sense of security, financial security, ecological security, and the systems that we have in place beyond education and the economic models that we have in place perpetuate an exploitation of people and all of the isms that we see, whether it's racism, sexism, ableism, classism. And so I think that the ideas that we're discussing and the ideas around contemplative education really can only be actually absorbed by people if you're in a place where you can actually make ends meet, where you feel that the neighborhood that you're living in is secure. And so the Black Lives movement or the Black Lives Matter movement is about that first and foremost. So I think that there's a little bit of a tension in saying that, you know, in talking about unity and diversity, when we're buttressing up against a system that that profits off of not having that. And so this then leads me to the education models that we've got. At least I can speak from our perspective here in the province of Ontario, that the public education system is thought out by the minute. And what is thought out in terms of education curriculum is supposed to be a means to an end. Education is no longer, is increasingly less seen as something to help build whole people, but rather people that are going to be productive in the economy moving forward. And you see that in post-secondary systems and a move towards encouraging students go into STEM fields as opposed to the arts and humanities. And so there's a tension in public education systems, in economic models that dictate what every minute of education needs to look like. And so I think that this then goes back to what Professor Opal was saying and what others have said, in that when we think of this education and when we think of this curriculum, how do you integrate all of those ideas? How do you name some of the things that I just talked about? But also, should we consider thinking about models outside of formal education systems where education is so prescribed and curriculum is so prescribed? So I'll leave that there. Unless there's a hot pursuit on that, I'll pass it on to Raj Uncle. No.
Garima,
Yeah.
I should tell you from my perspective, from my sansar, younger generation is more perspective, smarter than I am from my sansar point of view. My children are smarter than me. Their children are even smarter than they are. And actually their smartness has been growing all along, except that they are going in a certain direction. Let them continue. And this is where I'm going to support Shiv in one mention he made. Ramanujam wrote to Hardy. Hardy had his own sansar. We at Cambridge are smarter. Everyone is very uneducated. He threw the letter in the basket. Then he started thinking. He came out of his sansar, started to think of the basket, went back, picked up that envelope or part of the information, read it, and he came completely out of his shell or his sansar and decided, no, there is something in it and we should pursue it. And therefore, my point is again the same. In the learning process, nothing is unimportant. Everything is important. Every observation we make, we have to look at it from a dispassionate point of view, out of our own cell that we are living in, or cell that we have formed around, or sansar we have. By the way, the definition of sansar, sukh dukh is in sansar. In our definition of what is happiness for us, what will give me happiness, what will not give me happiness. We have made that sansar, we have made the choices. So the first is the choice, which was called as concentration. That's why we make the choice. Then we focus on it to get more meaning out of it. That is contemplation. And that education should be taught to everyone. To the younger children through toys, stories, to slightly older by challenging them to do some creative work. Think outside of the box. And that model, I can see the glimpses of the model, not the entirety of the model, because for the entirety of the model, the word consciousness has to be defined in for the teachers. Teachers should know what consciousness is, what existence is. Thank you.
Thanks. Milt, I see your hand.
Yeah, am I muted? No, I think I'm okay. Yeah, I'd just like to share one short thing. I've been teaching living systems, as you guys know, and I teach just a one class section on to kids on paradigm shifts, and in that short time that I have with them, what I explain to them is the difference in thinking between the Western world and the indigenous Eastern world, and what the difference is in terms of their worldview of, do they see the world as scarce or do they see it as abundance? And when they talk about it, when we talk about abundance, is that an abundance where I can take and take and take, which is very Western? Or is that an abundance where the earth will always provide as long as I meet my mutual responsibilities? In that short period of time, 100% of the students over and over again shift their paradigm from who they're being today to who they want to be when they go out into the work world. And we presented that yesterday in a science conference to Oregon high school or Oregon K through 12 science teachers. And we did the poll while I was explaining to the children. I let them take the same poll that the kids took, and 86% of them shifted. I was amazed. It's like we can be teaching things about life that we just haven't taught before. And so I want to send you folks a recording of that, because another piece of it was Ilarion Merkuliev, who is a Unangan Aleut elder, joined us. And he compared native science to Western science. And the comparison is really stark. And we have to start listening to people who are really tied to the earth in deep ways, so that we can have an education process that allows students to see the kinds of shifts that they want to make in their lives. And so I just want to bring that up before we close today. And I'll make that video available to you.
That would be great, Milt, if you could share that. Any comments, Shanta Auntie?
Not really. I think a lot has been said, and we've got to consider it all. And we've got to strengthen the proposal with the ideas of from various sources.
Hi, Auntie.
Yeah.
We just have a comment from Shanta Auntie, so let's just go over to her.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, Garima, I'd like to congratulate you that you are handling the conference so well. And the other lady, I don't remember her name, but you two are doing a fantastic job. And I totally agree with the lady who gave the presentation. What was her name? Who was having problems?
Robyn.
Robyn, yeah. I liked her suggestion about including all those things that she mentioned in the curriculum. And going back to the curriculum, I think we should have practice practical suggestions and not talk in abstract and high-flown things, because the kids need practical steps and the teachers can develop once they are given the outline. And thank you very much.
Thanks, Shantanti. Anyone else? Professor Opal?
You're muted.
I need to unmute myself. The only other comment I'd like to make is that we also need to consider how you're going to fit in all this contemplative education with everything else. What I mean is, we just cannot keep on adding more and more stuff. We need to think about what possibly we can displace. I know that's not a good word because somebody else will get excited, why are you displacing me? But I think we need to put in thought of how are you going to fit in all this together into a package. By all this, I don't mean only contemplative education. I'm talking about, how to fit in contemplative education with the other things that need to be done as part of education. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I agree. I think we need to think of different types of material for different audiences. So for some folks, it's 2 pages and that's all they will read. For some people, it's longer than that. For some people, it's decks. So the format really matters. Robyn, I see your hand. Robyn? Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about that. I'm hoping that we can figure out a way to integrate it into the already functioning system. So in other words, in biology class, when you're talking about, life in general, the connections, the energy that they've researched and found that, plants even emit energy. Again, when you're talking in physics or mathematics, that you can talk about the atom and the discovery of energy, even though it's unseen, unsmelled, and untouched, they know it exists, that we can put some of these pieces in already existing curriculum and then have I don't know whether it would be an elective or some sort of a wholeness class that would connect all these pieces, but making sure that some of these things are also repeated in these basic classes like science and physics and, that sort of thing. I mean, that's what I'm hoping for, that we can actually create a blended type of education so that we're not replacing anything, we're just adding to it. Anyway, that's all.
No, I think that's helpful, Robyn, because I think we need to think of, there's different things. There's replacement, there could be interactions, there could also be synergies, right? And so what you're talking about is how do we think of the synergies between what is being discussed right now and in different classes that students might already be taking. So that's helpful. But also don't want to lose sight of what Professor Opal was saying in terms of perhaps the idea is not replacement, but when we're thinking of the audience that you're speaking to, being really crystal clear about the format of the presentation and what is being presented, because the synergies might matter in the actual implementation, but might not matter in the actual advocacy part. And that's something that we can discuss at our next session, and actually segues nicely into our next session. But Uncle Raj, I see your hand up. So let's give you the final 2 minutes and then we're going to wrap it up.
2 minutes. I want to talk about Waterloo mode of education in engineering.
Okay.
Second Dean of Engineering wanted to establish a research center. She would know about that. The meeting to convert that idea into a group, research group, came up. And somebody asked a very interesting question. Are we going to follow Toronto model, or are we going to follow Cambridge model of education or research? And the answer of that dean was classic. Why do I have to follow Cambridge or Toronto model. Why don't we develop a model which world will follow? And that's the model we have been using in Waterloo all along, starting from 66. And that's the message I have for the group.
That's an
It's
excellent
a model which everyone will follow. You do not follow any model. Did I make any sense?
Yeah, no,
Hello?
yeah, we can hear you. That's an excellent message to actually conclude with, I think. You know, how do you, yeah, I think that nothing more needs to be said. I'm mindful of the time, and so just wanted to see if there was any last parting comments folks wanted to make. I think Raj Uncle said something very nicely, and so don't want to overshadow that. Otherwise, would like to thank you all. Dayaji, I see your hand.
I want you to repeat what Raj Dubey said, because I missed his words. The sound was breaking up.
Okay, no problem. Do you want to go ahead?
I can repeat it. I can repeat it.
You're breaking up
In
again.
Yeah, Raj Uncle, your connection is unstable right now, so you're breaking up.
Okay, let me try slowly. Maybe that will get across. In 1966, Waterloo Engineering Group wanted to start solid mechanics division. And meeting was going on to make or establish that group. A question was asked from one of the professors: what model will this group follow? Will it be modeled from Toronto, University of Toronto, or will it be from Cambridge University of England? And the class answer of the second dean of engineering, who were chairing that meeting, was, why do I have to follow somebody else's model? We are going to create a model which the world will follow. And within 5 years of that time, University of Waterloo became the leading research group in solid mechanics division.
I like that.
And this is my advice to the group.
I like that very much. Thank you very much. That's great advice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought that was a very fitting way to end today's session. So, and actually, as we conclude today's session, let me just foreshadow what we're going to talk about next week at our final session. So our next session is going to be next Sunday on the 18th at 10 a.m. Eastern. And at that session, I'm actually going to talk a little bit about the policymaking process here in Ontario and in Canada to provide a bit of a flavor of what the policymaking process can look like. Of course, depending on the jurisdiction that you're in, or the city or town or state, this can look very different. But I think that to create the systemic change that we're all looking for, having some fluency in policy making and policy development is really important. And so if we are going in with this idea of creating a world-class model, something that others can emulate and follow, I think that this is important learning. And so we will conclude the conference with that session. And so between now and then, if there are any materials that you'd like to share with us, as always, please feel free to do so. We've welcomed lots of materials that have been shared over the past couple of weeks. And we welcome and are really grateful for your enthusiasm in wanting to strengthen the proposal and strengthen and sharpen our work. It really, truly does take a community, despite the great leadership that we've got from Mai Thayaji or Shiv Talwar. With that, is there anything else for folks? Otherwise, enjoy your Saturday. And for those in Canada, happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving to everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Garina.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you, Shiv.
Bye.
Take good care.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for your participation.